Napa know-how.
A Napa guy knows more isn't always better, unless we're talking about full-size vans. These beasts do more than get you from A to B. They have so much space a man can live in it. With shag carpeting, waterbed, and a sweet lava lamp, these mobile abodes have all the comforts of home. With quality parts and plenty of Napa know-how, you can keep the original tiny house running longer, stronger. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt, and you have reached Venus Unplugged. And what we do here is we explore all things Venusian, the archetype, love, relationships, dreams, the underworld. So we never quite know where we're going to go with this, because it is a complex and fascinating subject matter. And what I have kind of cooked up for the fall menu, for the fall feast, since we're gradually going into the underworld, but I thought it would be interesting to explore the Valkyries. The Valkyries was the name around the women around Jung, and how they developed. Now, this was 100 years ago that this first, the Institute didn't start till 1948. Okay, so I'm jumping, I'm leaping. I'm going to do a quantum leap right now, but I'll be right back. Monday, the 29th, very important. For those people, it's Michaelmas Day, this coming Monday. Now, the month of September is always an opportunity, stellar opportunity for spiritual progress. And that's because there are two magical events in September that can help your development. But you need to take advantage of them. So the first is the autumn equinox, which we're going through this week. And this it's the second equinox of the year, which occurs between the 21st and the 24th. So that just passed. And as I had mentioned before, that's also when magic spells dissolve or break. So it's a very, very good time for psychic protection, but also just to break things. One needs to break things, clean out closets and break things. So the equinox is they're clearing out times kind of astral junk created by negative thoughts and words and actions. And they'll be swept away by inner storms if we're willing to let go. So that's what this week has been about, in case you haven't noticed. I don't know how you would miss this week. So we're using this week of the equinox to discern negative attitudes and complexes, and to bring those little shadows out into the light of awareness. So it's time to ask yourself, what's holding you back? What's preventing you from flourishing? And once you kind of get the naked truth, lift them up and let them go, and allow the astral equinox tide to bear them away to the unmanifest, as they call the heavens, where they will cease to be. Now, the second event comes the 29th, this coming Monday, which is Michaelmas, which is the feast of St. Michael and all angels. Michaelmas, which I think is terrific. So we're having an angel feast fest, okay? And it's the most powerful and angelic event of the year, an outpouring of celestial wonder and gracious blessings. We can use all the gracious blessings that we can bear, that we can take in. As people understand, it is not like to think we can receive, but receiving means we have to let go of that other stuff too, so we have room for receiving. So we're kind of doing like angel feng shui within, all right? So at Michaelmas, the good angels who answer prayer are especially close. And so anyone who works with angels, and if you don't start now, it's the intention. Anyone who works with angels will be put some time aside over the Michaelmas tide and evoke blessings for yourself and others. And that's the message. I love that all this stuff happens. So the Valkyries, we're back there. The Valkyries are the women that are around Jung, that were so influenced by him, was attracted to him and to his work. Now we're talking, like 1910 Switzerland. So it's a century ago. Then this man, who's a doctor, but then gets interested in psychology. That's psychology. What that is the ology of how psyche works. So Jung, began his journey and his work, and had many kind of brilliant women were attracted to him. Some of them were analyzed by him. Some were analyzed by his wife, Emma Jung. And so you get the feeling, or it's pretty obvious, that he has a particular sensitivity to the feminine psyche. And that, women, now you have to remember, 100 years ago, they didn't even think women had souls. So he, due to the way he saw the world and what he was exploring, these women were attracted to him. And in being attracted, they began to, and in doing their own analysis with him, many of them became some of the finest therapists and archetypal psychologists in the world. So I thought the first should be, I suppose, they probably would be the wine list, don't you think? Well, I couldn't imagine Emma Jung as an appetizer or Tony Wolfe as an appetizer. So let's just say that these are the women of the finest wine, which is a wonderful alchemical image and process. So what Jung, he didn't mean to, get all these women around him, but he did, because, women are always the first to exchange, to explore. Even though we may be terrified, we still walk into the unknown with a certain kind of thrill. Like, oh my God, I don't know. Yes, I'm going anyway. Keep walking. And these women, they became, the first generations of Jungians, okay, Esther Harding and Helen Luke, and the women who I'm going to be reading some of their works, so you get a flavor and a sense, because we've all been affected by them. And these are the foundation babes. You want to talk badass? This is what badass really is. When you're in a Victorian world, you find out about some guy who's got some cockamamie theories, right? Nobody's quite sure about any of this. You don't even have a soul, according to the patriarch. Not to mention the ability to vote. And you're in Switzerland. This could be very closed off. And yet Jung was more, he was totally universal, but he was also kind of this earthy guy. He was also a Leo, so of course women would flock around him. And he deeply loved and respected these women. And even though that was a burden for him at times to be the spiritual father, but he did kind of keep them in an equilibrium, because, they would then, after their analysis, and then they would go back and forth maybe twice a year or something, just to kind of get up on things, get reunited, I suppose. All right, and these women then created the foundation. Okay, so there's Jung, the collected works, and which is like reading rock soup. It's very hard to read his stuff unless you really know. I read it and then I fall asleep and I know it's going in somewhere and I don't try to catch it with my mind because it can't. But my heart catches it and then gives it back to me when it wants to. So it can do that. So the first woman that we're going to, Dr. Jacoby, she was the only extrovert. And most of the women around Jung were deeply introverted. So at times they could seem like snobs, but they really weren't. It was just like, introverts, it's like, leave me alone. I just want to go in. They find their process through the inner world, not the outer. But Dr. Jacoby, she was the star and probably only extrovert in the first generation of Jungian, and she was the one actually 30 years later, 1948, started the Jungian Institute, which Jung never went into. But we're talking like 1910, 1918, and they had what they call a Jungian club. So these women would gather around, and they would discuss his concepts. But it was created kind of as a forum for these women to explore their papers, write out what they were discovering. So this is really, really some badass breakthrough dynamic. I don't usually like to go back to the past for any particular reason, but I think it would be interesting to be a fly on that wall. And there's a little anecdote that this one of the men was getting very upset about. It was shortly before the Second World War. So you need, what I want to build here is also the environment, because also Switzerland, if you can believe it, was a place where expatriates and even Lenin lived a few blocks. The guy who took over Russia, that one, and some great writers lived right in that area. So it was a hotbed of transformation. And I know we hear about Jung, and we also read works of von Franz and all these different women, but we don't realize the environment that they were in. It was between, World War I and II, rich. The Dada movement, which is the artistic movement, was born there in Switzerland. So for such a repressed place, there was a lot going on. And so this one guy was like really upset. He's like, what's with all these women hanging around Jung? And of course he was one of, the old boys club. It's like, what purpose could they have? And Jung was encouraged these women and developed them. And at times he would even matchmake, in the sense if he knew that these women were going to, really be professionals, but they always needed friends. So it'd be like, okay, live with this person. All right, and develop the friendship, because he felt that doing this work alone is dangerous, which he knew. You're going into the depths of the unconscious, which we have to have enormous respect for. You're not going to snap your fingers. Psyche will rip your head off, and with good reason. She'll give it back to you, but you'll remember the experience. So this guy was, complaining, and that Jung just went on. He just said, "Hey, look, man, he loved and respected these women, even though it was a burden being a spiritual father at times." And then he said to him, "Wait until you're my age, and if you don't have a few of these old girls hanging around, I'll be surprised." So he had deep love and respect, and he also knew that it was the way of the feminine, that was the deal, that it was the depth. That's what he was touching in his work. And Jung felt that women needed his presence, even if only in the form of an occasional visit, and for their continued well-being. And so this was very shamanistic, because he knew they were also treading, and he knew that he didn't know enough about the feminine. He certainly couldn't, because he wasn't feminine. Okay, he was doing the work on the anima, which is the male soul, and these women contributed tremendously through their own journey and their courage, enormous courage. So they began to mine the depths of psyche. And they played an important part in Jung's development. And he says that himself, which is kind of cool, because a lot of people wouldn't. And it was the women he knew. Now, also, Freud, which, the famous story of him and Freud and blah, 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 and then they have a breakup, and then Jung has a nervous breakdown, but as he's doing that, he's beginning to go into the depths of the unconscious. And that's where he starts to get his true body of work. And Freud was the one, his whole edible complex, and women were hysterical. It never dawned on that they might be repressed because they were brilliant, and they had no place to put that brilliance. And Jung began to realize, as they gathered naturally, that these women had tremendous value. And also fate. We know good old fate, or infinite fate, will always set up the dynamics. And what we all need. So he needed the voice of these women, which he helped them get to, and then allowed them to write and become therapists. And of course, his famous quote, I'm glad I'm Jung and not a Jungian. But few creative men during the first half of the century took women seriously at all. Still less would be willingly take them on and collaborate with them and have them as assistants and working. So they were his muses also. So let's talk about the first woman of all men, Mama Jung, and his relationship with his mother. See, the Jungian psychology stems from an awareness of the mythical material operating in the psyche. And there are indications that one of the myths operating in his own personal psyche was Pygmalion. And these indications keep cropping up in the women's descriptions of him, which we'll go over too. So his mother, who he had a very, very strong relationship with, but she was a little tipsy, all right? From reading and also reading other works, she obviously was a psychic, a clairvoyant. It ran in the family, but it was repressed. But Jung, as a young boy, knew. He'd say, she's very loving, and I kind of trust her during the day, but at night, she becomes other. So here he is born through a woman who is holding the archetype of the great mother. So her name was Emile. And out of the book Dreams, Memoirs, and Reflections, all right, this is a quote from Jung, one of his memories. One memory recalls a slender young woman wearing a dress made of black printed all over with green crescents, who could be happy and laughing, but was the subject to fits of depression. This was Jung's earliest recollection. Why can't I say that? Okay, I'm not going to say it. Okay, of his mother. Maybe I'm going to start to channel his mother. And one is tempted to linger under the significance of the memory when she was wearing, given the folklore and mythologies of the Great Mother. So that's his first memory. And there she is with an outfit on. I love when the outfits show up. That's so Venusian. Find the outfit and they will come. Believe me, it works. When I don't know what to do, I get the outfit together. I just say, okay, I'll do this. And then Psyche is cooking and, as she does with all of us, on the need-to-know basis. Because it's a dream, synchronicity, radio shows on Venus Unplugged. So here comes that's his first memory of the moon goddess that's found all over the world. The Egyptian Isis, the Selene, the Greeks Mona, Selene of the Greeks, and Mona of the gods, and the Celts. So he knows something is happening. And it fascinated him and terrified him. So one of the passages that he wrote describing Mother, she was somehow rooted in the deep, invisible ground, though it never appeared to me as confidence in her Christian faith. So he smelled the pagan. For me, it was somehow connected with animals, trees, meadows, running water, all of which contrasted sharply with the Christian faith. It never occurred to me how pagan this foundation was. So animals and trees and meadows and running water, with these images, we are once again in the presence of the domain of the Great Mother, rather than the Judeo-Christian world. And Emile keeps this pagan goddess quality throughout her son's autobiography. He refers many times to her second personality. I can relate to that totally. And then her unconscious personality would put in an appearance, which spoke in the voice of a Sibyl. So this is what this dude's exposed to. And which unexpectedly powerful, she would become a somber, imposing figure possessed of unmistakable authority and no bones about it. This is central to his psyche. Well, that's what Jung was doing with his mother complex. He was turning it into gold. So he says here that I was sure she was consistent of two personalities. One innocuous and human, the other uncanny. This other emerged only now and then, but each time it was unexpected and frightening. What she said struck me to the core of my being, so that I was stunned into silence. The second personality of the Delphic oracle. So that's when they were on the tripod and 100 feet up, and they'd eat laurel leaves and have hallucinations, and then would commune with the gods. So imagine having a mother like that. My mother was like that a little bit, but it wasn't that commanding. It was more the shrieking that got your attention. But that's right. Dare I digress? So he stresses that his mother was very good to him and that she affected his development more than the father. And he had this intense, lifelong relationship with his mother. That is the collective unconscious. It's a rational imagery and it's symbolism. So, of course, being that connected to the eternal feminine, she would also manifest and mirror the shadow sides of that, which could be pretty terrifying. Every child knows their mother is a witch on some level. And sometimes they push the mother into it That's okay, you're bringing up my witch. And obviously, that kids are very clear about that stuff. They probably even see it clairvoyantly. And one of Jung's first papers, his first paper was on the occult. And he had a cousin, and they would do who was a medium, and they would do mediumship, and he wrote papers on that. But he kept that stuff kind of secret because he wanted to be Dr. Jung, and didn't want to be judged for his interest in the occult, which I think is kind of smart. I think when you're studying the esoteric or hidden, the axiom of those who know don't say and those who say don't know is very important. You don't want somebody to know about it? Don't tell them. It's like what was the quote with Lincoln? When he quoted, he says, I can keep a secret. It's those people I'm telling that can't. So that's kind of funny. So one of his first papers in psychology was based on the psychic happenings from his mother's side. His observation with a young mediumistic cousin. The paper was entitled On the Psychology and Pathology of the So-Called Occult Phenomenon. Interesting, right? There's also one of it, not in the collective works. It's an addition to the collective works. Jung felt that UFOs were the self with a capital S. That was the influence of the self. So this dude was like, bringing in and recognizing and working with some serious forces of psychism and supernatural and mysticism. One needs a certain nervous system, which is wired very differently. I remember when I was in the 7 years of esoteric training, we had to change, and through meditation and artwork and everything, each different body, the astral body and the ethereal and all of that, to be prepared to receive this stuff, because you could burn up. People don't know what the psychic or the medium goes through. They just think they're just like, okay, just telling a story. No, they're not. Sometimes they can be in very dangerous realities. There's many, many, many realities. So it may look easy, but it's not. And anybody who's attempted it knows. So here Jung, okay, and of course he had to have an absolutely healthy share of psychism to get to the levels that he got to do the Red Book, to do everything that he did. So there we have it. Mommy was right there. Her energies indicated the fact that at one point that she entered, into a hospital for the treatment of an unspecific illness. So she probably went mad. But when you're born that way and you can't work with the energies, you think you're crazy. I certainly always thought I was crazy. And once I began to understand, oh, wait a second, the door is the wall is the door. Okay, I got it. But it took many, many years and decades of therapy and inner work and tears and a lot before I could understand what this was about. So, and on the night that his mother died, right, catch this, on the night of her death, he had a dream which was rooted in the Teutonic mythology. It was a heroic, primitive landscape. Suddenly, I heard a piercing whistle that seems to respond through the whole universe. My knees shook. A gigantic wolfhound with a fearful, gaping maw burst forth. At the sight of it, the blood froze. It tore past me, and I suddenly knew the wild huntsman had commanded it to carry away a human soul. I awoke in deadly terror, and the next morning I received the news of my mother's passing. So what's in a dream? everything. And Jung wasn't, he was he was Gnostic, I mean, he had a whole different relationship to the cosmology. So what I am going to do, I'm going to post this, or go on Blog Talk Radio and sign up so you can get this sent to you, or go on to iTunes, and I will be posting this on Pinterest. I love Pinterest. I'm one of those cat ladies on Pinterest. But that's the story, Morning Glory. So have a glorious 29th. I won't be broadcasting next Thursday. I will be up at John of God's Being Transformed. But tune into iTunes and tell the world, because that's how I know the work is getting out there. Otherwise, I don't know. And I want to know. Go on the website and set up an appointment if you want, whatever. Okay. Happy Candlemas. Michaelmas. Bye-bye.
Progressive presents Mindflowness with Flow.
Before you lies a beautiful meadow. In that meadow, Progressive Direct has placed its auto insurance rates alongside those of competitors. You select the lowest rate and feel a great sense of calm. A great sense of...
Compare Progressive Direct rates with competitors' rates so you can rest easy. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Vary based on how you buy. Vary based on how you buy. Vary based on how you buy.